Hello, and thank you for tuning in again to another chapter from our daily bread. Today we'll be reading in Exodus 32, the golden calf. If you're not familiar with the Bible or a lot of scriptures, this is one of the stories, along with the Ten Commandments, that you are likely familiar with. In this chapter, I want to discuss questions like, why did the Levites receive such a special place in the ministry of Yahweh? Why did they make the golden calf? Did they abandon Yahweh? I'll be using the biblical text here as well as commentary and other historical data to answer some of those questions. Let's go ahead and pick up our reading in verse 1. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." So interesting, it says Moses delayed. What's taking this guy so long? I'm guessing he did not tell them beforehand, I'm going to be about 4 days and 40 nights, so just wait for me. So they're probably thinking he died or something happened. Now, in this delay, I like there's a point that was made here. As they're waiting for him, and they're asking Aaron to up and make gods for them. It's interesting because they were still encamped upon the ground which they had every reason to regard as holy. So all the things that they've seen up to this point, and even the ground that they're standing on, the fact that they're still free was not enough for them to remember that Yahweh was almighty, and he could leave him there and still come back after 40 days. Although the cloud of glory that capped the summit of Sinai was still before their eyes, affording a visible demonstration of their being in close contact, or rather in their immediate presence of God, they acted as if they had entirely forgotten the impressive scenes of which they had been so recently witnessed. And I love that point, because isn't that what happens? Isn't that what happens in the midst of a blessing? Maybe a house or a job or a family, or you just simply your health. Even while you still have that blessing, the anointing of Yahweh still rests on you, and you're standing upon it with your feet, closing your back in your right mind. We can forget and begin to seek other gods. And that's what happened here. Verse 2, so Aaron said to them, "Take off your rings of gold that are in your ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me." And I put a note here highlighting your sons, because we learn also that it was not common for them to have earrings. It was not an Egyptian custom for young men to wear earrings, and this circumstance therefore seems to point out the mixed rabble, who were chiefly foreign slaves, as the ringleaders in this insurrection. So there's some discussion about the fact that this was not a Hebrew practice, and it was not an Egyptian practice for males to be wearing rings in their ears. So it must be the quote-unquote mixed rabble that the scripture refers to that's among them. Because remember, it wasn't just Israel that came out of Egypt. There was a mixed rabble. There was all kinds of people, and slaves and Egyptians and people from all over. So when he gave the commandments, that's another point to remember, he was not giving it just to Judah, which is where the Jews came from, or even just to the 12 tribes. But he was giving it to everyone who heard this word. And it was those individuals that may have started this insurrection, the complaints about not having this or that. So just a side note there. In verse 3, so all the people took off the rings of gold that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron, and received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. They made a golden calf. You ever wonder why they made a golden calf? They could have made anything. They could have made a golden bar. They could have made a golden lizard. They could have made a golden bird. They could have made a silver bird. They could have made all kinds of things, but why gold and why a calf? I don't know why gold, but I have an idea why a calf now after looking at a little bit of text here. So we find out that the calf was a common god in Egypt. So this idol seems to have been the god of Apis, the chief deity of the Egyptians, worshipped at Memphis under the form of a live ox, 3 years old. So it was distinguished with a triangular spot on his forehead and so on. So you can take the people out of Egypt, but they still have Egypt in them. So when looking for another god, they went back to what they used to in Egypt. And you probably catching that point of how we can bring that back with us, right? Because although we've come out of the world, the world can still be in us. And when we are pressed to our ends and we're hungry or angry or struggling in some way where we're pressed at our wits, we can easily revert back to the world that's within us. And that's why he asks us and calls us to clean our hearts and clean our insides and renew our minds, because it's required. Even though they left Egypt, Egypt is still in these individuals. And we must make sure that the world is constantly being pushed out of us too, and we're being cleansed in that way. So that's where the calf came from. That's the idea, and that's a big lesson that we need to learn, is to make sure that we don't revert back to just what I saw mom and daddy doing, or just what I saw my supervisors or teachers doing, but whoever it is that had an impact on us, our cultures, but making sure his kingdom reigns supreme. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation that said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to Yahweh." Interesting. It would seem that they have all but forsaken Yahweh, everything, and we're going to get somebody else. But they said, now let's make a feast to Yahweh. On the contrary, they were actually celebrating Yahweh with the golden calf. Imagine that. They're celebrating Yahweh with the golden calf, completely denying the first commandments that says, "You shall have no other gods before me." And yet they're saying, let's make gods and celebrate Yahweh. What happened so quickly? It's so in and out, and this is such a big point. I don't want to spend a ton of time, though we could, because for those of us who are religious, it's so easy to never lose Yahweh, and because we know that that's right, but we're bringing all this other stuff. It was a practice that a word that's called syncretism, where you have mixed all the religions and come up with one new thing, and we tend to want to do that. Sometimes with our culture, depending on where you grew up, depending on what country you're from, you want to mix Yahweh's laws and scriptures and principles, and somehow mix them together to make sense in your culture, in your mind, in your own practices, and say this is why this is right. Well, they mixed their Egyptian understanding and customs with Yahweh and said this is good, now let's celebrate Yahweh. We can even see this done, and a lot of people will get offended at the idea of this, but with being American and being patriotic, sometimes we get so patriotic that we equate being patriotic and American with being a Christian, or with being a disciple of Yahweh, a follower, a believer, whatever word you want to use. Those two don't necessarily go together. As a matter of fact, many times they're at odds with each other, but we don't want to see that, so we always find a way to bring them back together, because being an American and being a believer go hand in hand, it seems, but they really don't. So let's continue to make Yahweh's kingdom supreme at the expense of whatever culture or practices or customs that we may be familiar with. Whatever holidays and traditions I may have gotten used to, let's be careful not to try to mix them like they try to mix with these gods and put those both things together. So it's worth considering and having some time to meditate. In what ways am I mixing my customs and my culture with the practice of believing in Yahweh, and maybe watering down, diluting some of his principles in doing so? Tomorrow shall be a feast to Yahweh. And they rose up early the next day, offered burnt offerings, and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. Oh, they rose up to play. What's so bad about that? Well, when we get into, if we study out the word play, they didn't get up to play checkers. They didn't get up to play tag. They didn't get up to just play. When you study out this word, it becomes clear that there's more to this play than just simple child's play. But it was an insinuation of something more immoral and even sexual. So let's look there. See if I got that note here. So we see here in the new manners and customs of the Bible that about the word play. The Hebrew verb sahak, translated play in the King James Version, rendered of this verse, is highly suggestive of sexual activities. And the same verb, it is the same verb used in Genesis 26:8, where it says, when he had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out of the window and saw Isaac laughing with Rebekah, his wife. See, this idea of laughing, okay, let them say it. That is translated caressing. How is laughing caressing? Well, sometimes things are lost in translation, and this was one of them. It just says play. But there's something more and behind this play as we're seeing it, and now it can even be translated caressing, this laughing or play. In the NIV, and sporting in the King James. Considering the drinking that was taking place and the nakedness, the worship of the calf may have turned into a drunken sex orgy, which is not uncommon among the pagans. More than likely, some of the Israelites had picked up these ways of worshiping while slaves of the Egyptians, and had even worshipped with them, or as they did. This is what they grew up. You got to remember that this is all they've known. A generation has grown up and died in slavery. Another generation has grown up and died in slavery. Another generation. So they've been in slavery from birth until their adulthood, and that's all they've seen. So when they want to express their worship to some god, they go back to what they're used to, that custom and that tradition we spoke of. So this play, you get the picture, right? That this is a very lewd scene that's going on. In verse 7, and Yahweh said to Moses, go down, for your people whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way that I commanded them. They have turned aside. Yahweh says, this is how he sees it. He says, you guys have turned away quickly. So what is quickly to Yahweh? Well, Moses was about to come back down, obviously, so we're at the end of 40 days. 40 days, 40 nights, and they've made a god. In Yahweh's mind, that was quick. Now, for someone else who's been waiting for a long time, day after day, not knowing what's going on, it's over a month. And you said that's quick? In Yahweh's mind, of course, it's quick. Of course, we know the scripture that says to him, a day is like 1,000 years, and then 1,000 years is like a day. So we should remember that this is a marathon. This is not something that you're looking for quick returns. And be patient and wait for Yahweh. They have made for themselves a golden calf and have worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Wow, exclamation mark there. I can't imagine how angry. Being the first command, thou shalt not make another god. And this is exactly what they did. And Yahweh said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. And therefore, leave me alone. Let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, in order that I may make a great nation of you. Wow, Yahweh was hot. But Moses implored Yahweh, his God, and said, O Yahweh, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, with evil intent did he bring them out, to kill them in the mountains and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your anger. Turn from your burning anger and relent from this disaster against your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants to whom you swore by your own self, and said to them, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven. And all this land that I have promised I will give to your offspring, and they shall inherit it forever. And Yahweh relented. Listen to that. Isn't that beautiful? And Yahweh relented from the disaster that he has spoken of bringing on his people. He relented. He relented from the disaster. How did Moses get Yahweh to relent from bringing the disaster? I thought this was an amazing point, because if you study out what he did here, he reminded Yahweh of his promises. If you wanted Yahweh to move in a powerful way in your life, one of the great ways of doing so is praying his scriptures, his word. Yahweh, you said. You said that you would never leave me or forsake me. Yahweh, you said that you will be a rock on under my feet. Your wings are. You said, knowing his scriptures and repeating them back, his promises. And that's what he says. Remember Abraham and Isaac and Jacob? And do you remember how the Egyptians might look at us? Do you remember? And Yahweh relented. What a powerful point. In verse 15, then Moses turned and went down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand. Tablets that were written on both sides. He didn't waste any space there. On the front and the back, they were written. The tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, engraved on tablets. When Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. But he said, it is not the sound of shouting for victory, or the sound of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing that I hear. And as soon as he came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, Moses' anger burned hot. And he threw the tablets out of his hand and broke them at the foot of the mountain. See, Moses didn't see what Yahweh saw. And when he saw and heard, his anger burned hot. And I put a note there, as you see, because being angry is something that most believers look down on. But there is a type of anger. There is a type of indignation that Yahweh doesn't mind and even loves. He gets angry, and there's things that he hates. There was a man who was so indignant and angry that he drew a spear through 2 people when they went into the tent together that weren't supposed to be. Yahshua himself, in his anger, created a whip and cleared out the temple. And now Moses, in his anger, took the tablets and broke them at the foot of the mountain. This anger seems out of control. It seems from the evil one, but on the contrary, it is not. Why? Because there's 2 sides. There's love and there's hate. Because in order for you to really love something, you're gonna hate something else. You see, I love the health and protecting my family, so I'm gonna hate anything that comes against them. And it's the same way here. But James says, in contradiction, for man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. So how can that work? Well, remember, God's anger is righteous anger. And we need to make sure that our anger is the same anger that he has. Yahshua was angry because he was zealous for his temple. Moses was angry because he was zealous for Yahweh and his principles. And he saw what the people were doing and how they were making themselves a mockery in the eyes of the nations. Zeal and anger for Yahweh. You can say whatever you wanted to about Yahshua, but he got angry if you mess with the spirit or said anything against the spirit or touch Yahweh's temple. So make a point of that. Godly anger is righteous anger. In verse 20, he took the calf that they had made and burned it in the fire and ground it to powder and scattered it on the water and made the people of Israel drink it. And Moses said to Aaron, what did this people do to you, that you have brought such a great sin upon them? My goodness. Let me say something to the leaders. And most of you watching this are leaders. If you're parents, you're a leader. If you're a leader. And just about everyone who's looking at leads in some capacity. He says, what have you done? What have you done? And of course, Aaron tries to put the blame in, saying in verse 22, let not your anger, my Lord, burn. You know the people, they are set on evil, for they said to me, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. So I said to them, let any who have gold take it off. So they gave it to me, and I threw it in the fire, and out came this calf. So Aaron did his best to try to abdicate all responsibility, one to the people and two to just some kind of circumstances, and it just popped out a calf and whatever he could do to say, I'm not responsible. Well, let me tell you the humbling reality. If you're a parent, if you're a man, if you are in any role where you have authority of some sort over a person, or you're just an adult because your niece and nephews and younger ones look up to you, you have a responsibility that you might not want. And Yahweh's going to call you an account for that. It's fathers, especially husbands. What a taxing and trying role, because he holds us accountable, and we need not to try to brush that off to someone else or something else. He says, you have brought such a great sin upon them. You did that. They're grown men and women. What do you mean I did that? You brought that among them. And verse 25, and when Moses saw that the people have broken loose. Other translations like they're going wild, they're naked. There's a lot of ways that this, but you get the idea that they're just lewd, and they're out there with very little to no inhibitions. For Aaron had let them break loose. There it is again, to the derision of their enemies. You let them break loose. You did not speak up. You did not put your foot down and say, this is enough. You let them do that. No, they're grown men and women. They do what they want. No, you are in a role of authority and leadership. I will hold you accountable. And that's why it talks about teachers being held to a higher accountable in James chapter 3. Verse 26, then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, who is on Yahweh's side? Come to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered around him. Oh, great. At least we got one group there. Where's everybody else? And he said to them, thus says Yahweh God of Israel, put your sword on your side, each of you, and go to and fro from the gate to gate throughout the camp. And each of you, oh my goodness, can you read that? Kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor. And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And that day about 3,000 men of the people fell. And Moses said, today you have been ordained for the service of Yahweh, each one of you, each one at the cost of his son and of his brother, so that he might bestow a blessing upon you this day. Yahweh is supreme and nothing else. You remember the scripture, Luke 14, if anyone will come after me, he must hate his mother, his brother, his children, even his own life. Here it is right here. Moses threw down the gauntlet. He drew a line and says, come here if you're with me. Take out your sword. Destroy all those who are coming against Yahweh. 3,000 people. And they were blessed because of it. They were blessed after killing their brothers. He says, you have gotten this position at the cost of your own sons. There were likely some of them who had to kill their own sons. And I know for some, blood will cause people, the blood relationship they have with their relatives will cause them to compromise on their convictions in the Word of God. They know that this is wrong, but because they fear backlash from family members, they pull back their hearts and they say, well, I don't want to endure her or him saying such a thing or thinking of me in such a way. They fear their family members more than they fear Yahweh. And so Yahweh does not get the glory. Now, I don't want to go too far to the other extreme either, right? Because some have thrown out their family in the name of Yahweh. And we don't do that either. But we must take care of our immediate family. But if it comes down to it, and you have to draw the line because Yahweh is saying they are against me, even to your brother, even to your mother, even to your family, your spouse. He says, draw the line. And we see this pop up in a lot of other places too. If someone spoke of doing divinity, he says, I don't care if it's your best friend. You remove him from the camp and you kill him. Yahweh don't play with that. I did want to make an interesting note here that I didn't know for a long time. Let me see if I can go there. You can't see that, so let me try to pull that up. So it's interesting that the Levites got such a blessing, and they were ordained in the ministry, and this is why the Levitical priesthood even existed now, because the Levites made an important decision. This one decision at the right time, and they gave their whole heart to it, and it changed the trajectory for their whole family line. But it wasn't always like that. Before this happened, Levites had a terrible name because of what Levi and Simeon had done. What is that? Let me find that scripture. All right, here it is. Their sister was defiled. Their sister went out to the lands and to see what the women were doing, and a guy found her and basically raped her and wanted to marry her. And they tricked them, saying, okay, look, they came back saying, what can we do to marry this daughter? We can join our peoples together and make this work. And they said, okay, sure, if you circumcise all your men. And it was that much worth it that the king and the son said, let's do it. And shortly after being circumcised, all the men, Simeon and his brother, let's see here, Simeon and Levite, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure and killed the males. So when they were most vulnerable and weak, they came and killed everybody. And it was a very ugly situation. I mean, these guys didn't have a chance. And all these families are without their brothers and husbands and such. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem, and when Jacob found out, he was upset. And he was like, hey, but look what they did to our sister. So Levi had such a bad name that when it was time that they received blessings, Jacob is blessing all his sons. Guess what Levi got? Guess what kind of, so he's blessing Reuben, you're my firstborn. Well, Reuben didn't do too well either for sleeping with his I think it was Leah. But the other ones got blessings, Judah and some of these other guys, Zebulun. He's just blessing everybody. But when he gets to Simeon and Levi, he says Simeon and Levi are brothers, weapons of violence. Wow, during the time of blessing, right? So this is a time of blessing, but he can't say a blessing to them. Simeon and Levi are brothers, weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. Wow. Oh my glory, be not joined to their company, for in their anger they kill men. Funny we're talking about anger, but their anger caused them to kill people. And in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. God, man, it was so bad. They killed the man, and they even cut the hamstring of the oxen. So they cut the legs of the oxen where they couldn't be used anymore. So the oxen suffered. They didn't do anything, and no one could actually use them. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Wow. So when we go back to the text here, and we find that they are being blessed. So this is later on. Today you have been ordained for the service of Yahweh. Wouldn't that be cool? To be the person who started that. You are now ordained in the service of Yahweh forever as a Levite, as a priest who ministered to him. That is your portion because of the act that you did here. So what a beautiful redemption for them in the presence of Yahweh. The next day Moses said to the people, you have sinned a great sin, and now I will go up to Yahweh. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sins. The atonement, the word in Hebrew lives to mean to cover something up. It's like you're taking something and just covering up, and that's all you can see. Just like his blood covers us. So when he tries to see us, he sees blood. And yeah, look at Moses, man. I want to make atonement. Maybe I can make atonement. Where many of us, where some of us, I won't say many, but some of us would have been like, no, you get what you got. And maybe not would have pleaded the other way. As long as it's not me, they messed up real bad. So Moses returned to Yahweh and said, alas, for this people have sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now if you will forgive their sin, but if not, look at that. Please blot me out of your book. Wow, he even put himself on there. He says, I put me on there. If you're not gonna help them, blot me out your book. Wow. Who we all need a Moses, don't we? We all need a person who's saying, I'm gonna back for you so much so I'll put myself out there. I'll die before you die. Praise Yahshua for being that person for us. And what a great brothers and sister who is that person for you, who's praying for you, interceding for you, and even taking it for you and saying, well, let me go, but not this person. Please blot me out of your book that you have written. But Yahweh said to Moses, whoever sinned against me, I will blot out my book. But now go lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit the sin upon them. Then Yahweh sent a plague on the people because they had made the calf, the one that Aaron made. So Yahweh decided to relent from his anger and not destroy them. But guess what? Here's the humbling fact that I'm always sobered by. Yahweh sent the plague. Why? Because there are some natural consequences to our poor choices. Yahweh forgives us. Yahweh removes us from that sin. He casts it as far as east from west. But my goodness, just like scars left from cuts, that sin, the consequences of the sin is often felt long after the sin. And some sins have heavier consequences. Again, although they're being forgiven, someone may forgive you, or Yahweh may forgive you, and you forgive yourself. And we moving on this past, there are some sins that all sins have consequences. Some have greater ones. Some sins have led some to have children for the rest of their life, been in prison for the rest of their life, drugs, and sometimes they've lost their life, although there is forgiveness for them. So please be careful and not think that you can always just ask for forgiveness and go back to normal, because it won't be back to normal. There's things that David couldn't do because of his sin. He couldn't touch the temple. He couldn't build it. There's things that probably Paul couldn't do because of the murder that he's done, although he did all great things. Our sin tends to limit how God is able to use us. Although he's so powerful, our faithfulness and what our actions, our sin that we choose, a lot of times can limit what God can and will do through us, because that's the nature of the law that he put in place in this universe. You reap what you sow. That's what he says. I put that in place, and you're going to sow it. Do not be deceived. Those who sow in the spirit will reap eternal life, but those who sow in the sinful nature will reap death and that judgment. So let's be careful how we are planting those seeds, and not being, I can do whatever, whenever, and I can just come back and ask for forgiveness. All praise be to Yahweh. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I pray that this was fruitful for you as we reflect on the golden calf. I hope you saw yourself in this story somewhere and thought to yourself, who am I? What would I've done? And better yet, what am I doing to make sure I'm not replacing Yahweh with other gods and trying to mix my culture and my customs and traditions of America, or where I was born, and the city and my family, that we're making sure that we keep our hearts pure and our minds pure before him. And remembering the Levites that were redeemed because of how much conviction they have at the right time to stand up and say, no, I'm going to have a godly anger.